This is the beginner's guide to how to freeze dry fruit for your home or your freeze drying business. We're going to cover a lot of different topics, the top 5 freeze dried fruits that have sold the most for me, as well as the tools that I've purchased that have made the preparation side very easy and smooth for the freeze drying process. We're going to cover some of the equipment that I've bought, as well as the freeze dryer settings that you're going to need for every single fruit that you freeze dry. And stay tuned to the end of this video because I'm going to share with you the packaging methods that you should use once the freeze dried fruit is all done. Hey, welcome back to the Freeze Dried Business channel. If you're new here, my name is David and I run a freeze dried business in Idaho. I've been running it for the past 4 years and I've learned a lot of different things, from the cottage food side, running it out of my home, to also having a commercial kitchen where I have wholesale and have learned a lot of different things in the food processing methods. So hit the subscribe bell if you want to follow me and follow more content related to freeze drying, and specifically freeze drying as a business. This is a huge, fun world of freeze drying, and I think it's only going to grow even more. So the more and more subscribers and community that we build here will benefit you all. Now in today's video, we're primarily going to cover what types of fruits I've seen successful in my freeze drying business, and then some of the tools of best ways to kind of cut and prepare them, and then the freeze dryer setting. Now the freeze dryer's purpose is to extract the water from fruit, but it's the purest form of keeping nutritional value in a food preservation method. That's why the freeze drying industry is blowing up so much, is because it's a great way to preserve your food. And since the water is removed and then the fruit is dried at a high temperature, now you're left with a way for you to crush the fruit flavor into a powder. And that's why with the baking side of things, now you can create a very flavorful type of cookie, a flavorful cake, or things like that that doesn't have that moist type of juice in it from the different fruits. So that's why the application is very high with freeze-dried fruit. Now, over the past 4 years of running my freeze-drying business as of this video, I've found that there's been 6 different types of fruits that have been the best sellers for me, and I've tried different fruits, but it really doesn't have the same take as these. Now the first one is blueberries. I've got a video on how to freeze dry blueberries, but we're gonna do 1 tray of that today. I've also found that strawberries have been a big seller. I also would suggest you doing bananas, and I also combine that to do a strawberry banana mix. I've also had success with freeze drying apples, as well as pineapple and raspberries. Now we're just gonna do apples, strawberries, and blueberries today just to keep it easy and simple. Now those are the 6 top freeze-dried fruits that I've been selling in my freeze-drying business, and I would suggest you try as well. And then as you start finding what your customers like, you can then pinpoint what you want to go for the most in terms of looking at having that as more of a consistent product to have. Now let's go over the tools that make these 3 fruits really easy to prepare. Now the blueberries, I've got this roller berry. Now this tool is something that I invested in. It's quite expensive relative to other methods that you can use, but this is the roller berry. It's a stainless steel rotating, spinning type of poking tool. And what it does is it's gonna poke the skin of the blueberries. And the reason you wanna do that is because the skin of the blueberry keeps that water inside. And so if you just put blueberries as is on the tray, it actually will explode. And I'm showing you a picture right now of what those blueberries that are exploded look like. So if you want them to look presentable and not exploding, I would suggest you find a method to be able to poke these blueberries. Now I've done it individually with a little skewer little needle, which took a long time. You can also use a meat tenderizer, but this has just been always sturdy for me, and you don't have to buy a bunch of them. They don't break down. But if you want to go the cheaper route, I've got a video link in the description below of the meat tenderizers, as well as the link to Frozen Right, who makes this roller berry. And this is a really easy tool that I'll show you how to use. For the strawberries, we want to use this egg slicer. That's right, it's an egg slicer. And you're gonna put the strawberries in here, and then you just snap it shut, and then it cuts it into 4 to 5 different slices. Now the reason you wanna use a slicer like this is because it actually can shorten the amount of time for the freeze drying process. Because the thinner the slice, the shorter amount of time the freeze dryer is gonna take to actually get to the last molecule of moisture in the strawberries. And that's why I like slicing the strawberries as well. Now with the apples, what I use is this big hunkin' tool. And the reason I've used this is because it's actually a potato fry slicer. And I like the fry type of look because it just looks more snacky, if that's even a word. And I like using it because it's also very fast and effective. So that's what I like using. I also have used the KitchenAid apple slicer as well as just cut it up by hand. But we're gonna use this today. And this you can find in the video description. It's a potato fry slicer. Now you're also gonna want a great sharp knife, something that doesn't dull too fast. And I've used these Cutco types of knives, and it's been a good investment because it never goes dull and I don't have to sharpen it that much. Now in my sink here to my left, I've got a strainer so that way I can wash off all the fruit prior to preserving this. Now, if you're in a commercial kitchen or you're preparing fruit for your customers, you want to make sure that you have some gloves, or you at least want to wash your hands in between handling different types of fruits. Because I'm in my kitchen right now in my home, I'm just going to not wear gloves, and it'll be a little bit messy, but it's perfectly fine just because we're going to do this video. These grates I bought off of Frozen Right as well, who makes the roller berry. These allow for some airflow when the drying process is kicked on into the freeze dryer. They make these for the Stay Fresh as well as for the Harvest Right freeze dryer trays from different sizes. Now I have the Harvest Right large freeze dryer, and so these grates are for the large size trays and they fit perfectly inside the tray like this. What I also like is these grates can easily be lifted out of the tray, and then the fruit stays on top, and then you can just dump it into your food safe bucket. Now, if you don't own a freeze dryer, you can always go to my affiliate link down below in the video description. I own Harvest Right as well as Stay Fresh freeze dryers. Both are great. I would suggest the Harvest Right freeze dryer for starting a freeze drying business. They have the largest freeze dryers right now for most affordable price for the highest capacity. For example, they have the XL freeze dryer that can do upwards of 40 pounds of food in one cycle. One cycle meaning you've got them all full of fruit. And so that's really nice compared to the large size, which can do upwards of, 16 pounds. So it's over 2 times the amount of food that you can do just in one cycle. And that really increases your bottom line in your freeze drying business because you want that freeze dryer running nonstop, but also getting the most production out of it once you press start on that machine. So that's what I would suggest. And if you want to know more about freeze dryers, go ahead and click the link below in the video description, and it'll tell you more about different reviews that I've made, as well as you can check out the website directly. Let's get started with the blueberries first. This container is 11 ounces of blueberries. I put 2 in my strainer, washed them all, and that's what we're going to put on the tray. Now, you have to keep in mind when freeze drying is if you want to put as much capacity on a freeze drying tray as you want, that's perfectly fine, but just know that it's going to take a lot longer for the freeze dryer and its process and its sensors to realize when it's all completely done. So you could be looking at a very long dry time. Now today I've got a cutting board, but typically what I have is one of the Harvest Right silicone mats that you put in your tray. They make them for all different size freeze dryer trays. Now what that silicone mat allows you to do is just not have such of a hard surface when you're rolling using the roller berry or you're using your meat tenderizer. I just like having a more soft cushion on there. So we're going to take the blueberries out of the strainer, and what I'm going to show you here is you just kind of line it up to the width of this roller berry tool. And I've just found that this just makes things a lot easier. So you roll across, and as you saw there, it rolled and poked the blueberries. Now each blueberry has kind of like multiple different pokes, so we put all those blueberries on the tray. Now the video footage I'm showing right now is not me right now. It's actually of my other video on specifically how to freeze dry blueberries, which you can take a look at in the video description, or after this video I'll show it up in the thumbnails. Because this actually shows you a detailed look at how to use this roller berry tool, how quickly and efficient you can do it. And now that we're done here, 22 ounces roughly of blueberries this is a great amount because we don't have any doubling up of volume on the tray. So it's gonna actually reduce our freeze drying time. Now that we're done with this, what I'm gonna show you is these tray stackers. And if you don't own tray stackers, they literally fit right on the edges of these trays. A lot of people make these, but I like buying from US made only. So I've got a link to the video description below of freezedryingsupplies.com, as well as links to Amazon with Sofo Survival, who makes these in America, and they're 3D printed, but they fit perfectly. And I've got a bunch of these so that I can quickly prep. And speaking of preparation, when you have a large amount of fruit that you're getting ready to prepare because maybe you got a good deal on it, you want to use that time effectively. And so using these tray stackers you're gonna do a ton of blueberries or a ton of strawberries when they're in season, and that way you can put these in your freezer. And the reason you're gonna pre-freeze is because it reduces the amount of time that you're having to prepare every single time you wanna put something into the freeze dryer. So if I've got 10 trays worth, which is 2 cycles worth of freeze drying, now I can prepare 10 trays worth of fruit. I'm putting it into the freezer, then it's all frozen. I take out 5, put them into the freeze dryer, my large freeze dryer, and then when that's done, I've already got some already prepped and in the freezer that I can just put them in again. So it makes it just more of an easier process. And that's the thing to know as a beginner, is you want to make things easy for yourself. And especially when you get into the seasonal side of purchasing fruit, you want to maximize the amount of fruit that you're going to buy and therefore prep it all at one time. Now that we're done with the blueberries, let's move on to strawberries. For the strawberries, the tools you need is obviously a knife to cut off the stems. And then if you're gonna slice them, you're gonna use this egg slicer. And I've got a link in the video description below to Amazon. It's not more than $10 to $12 for one of these. Now, I have in my strainer that I've washed, you wanna make sure you wash strawberries really well because of all those pesticides that can really soak in where the seeds are. I bought 2 pounds. This is 2 pounds of strawberries, 1 pound from the container. And that's about how much strawberries I'm gonna put on the tray that's sliced. Again, I've got a grate now in this tray, and as you can see, here's my blueberries underneath, and then I've got the tray stackers, and it sets right on top of here. It's very easy. So we're gonna cut the stems off of the strawberries, and what I do is I put the strawberries right there that have the stems off, and I put the stems in here. What we're gonna do with the stems is we're going to freeze dry them as well on another tray. And reason being is because there's a lot of value in the healthiness of the strawberry stems. I typically have always thrown away the stems, but I've been reading a lot more about the healthiness of the stems, and I'm going to put up a little bit of information about the healthiness of the strawberries right now so that you can see why you should probably keep the stems and freeze dry them, the leaves. There's a lot of value in that, and when you're freeze drying, the whole point is to preserve food and not have anything go to waste. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to put the stems on one tray as its own and have the sliced strawberries right here. Now, typically on a large tray that I have for this Harvest Right freeze dryer, I really only put about 2 pounds of strawberries on the tray that are sliced, because anything else would be kind of an overload. Okay, so now that we got those sliced, let's go ahead and grab our egg slicer. We're just putting it right on the grooves where the slicer are, and then we're pressing down, and it's cutting. Sometimes it sticks like this, but it's cutting them into the perfect slices. The thinner the slice, the more it's going to allow those freeze dryer sensors to notice that there's less water molecules in it for it to get it completely dry. Because if you left it full, which I've seen people do, that's perfectly fine, but think about how long it's going to take for the sensors to sense that there's no moisture inside the very core of this in the middle. It's just going to take a lot longer. So I like to keep things simple, and also it just makes a better snack when you're selling it in your freeze dryer bags. As you can see here, this is 2 pounds of strawberries all cut up. All right, so as you can see, we're gonna put more tray stackers, 4 to a tray, and now we can put another tray on top for our apples that we'll do next. All right, moving on to apples. Now, again, you can choose to slice up apples any way you want to. What I've chosen to use is a potato slicer. This is a really sturdy potato slicer. It has suction cups that can attach to your counter no matter where you are, and then you're simply gonna put the apple into the little slider area right here, and when this slides through, you can put the tray right below it, and when you press forward, it slices it perfectly into these apple slices. And now what you're seeing me do here is I'm just removing the kind of the core pieces, just because, at least for me, I don't really like the core pieces when I eat an apple, but I'm gonna take those out so that the seeds and the core part doesn't get freeze dried, because again, I'm selling this to customers. I'm not doing it for my own use. Customers are going to be different than what you're going to use freeze dried fruit for, right? So you want something that's going to be presentable, that looks nice, and it's not just something that you know came out of your own home, right? You want something to look presentable. All right, so now we're done with slicing up the apples. That was really quick. Now this is 5 gala apples on 1 tray. This is a perfect amount. Now, so that these don't brown up too much, I immediately put them in the freezer. If you want, you could maybe sprinkle over some lemon juice or something like that. That's what I've seen do it, but I just don't like the taste or kind of the smell of it. So what I do is I just quickly actually put these in the freezer. 3 different fruits all stacked together. And this is why you use the tray stackers. And then we're gonna put 2 more trays worth of fruit on top of here. And that is how you prepare apples, strawberries, and blueberries. Now let's get to the packaging and the freeze dryer settings. If you're liking the content, you're liking freeze drying fruit, hit the like button right now. This is really gonna help the video come up more in YouTube and on Google for future people who are looking to freeze dry fruit. I'd really appreciate it. And once again, hit the subscribe bell if you're not a subscriber already. I'd love for you to join the freeze drying business community. Now, once you're done with pre-freezing your fruit, or if you just wanna pop it in right away, you're gonna make sure that the freeze dryer is at 125 degrees Fahrenheit for freeze drying the fruit. Now, what you do wanna customize is the final dry time, and I would set that at a minimum of 6 hours. That just gives you more peace of mind that it's drying at a high temperature and getting all that water out. Now, typically people ask, what's the typical time frame for how long it's gonna take for freeze-dried fruit? That's all gonna vary on how much fruit and product you're putting on the tray. But generally, if I'm gonna do all 5 trays of my large Harvest Right freeze dryer with 2 pounds of strawberries to start with, that's 10 pounds total of freeze-dried strawberries. And that 10 pounds is typically gonna take about 36 to 40 hours to freeze dry completely. Now let's talk about the packaging size. So once you have the freeze-dried fruit done, you're gonna take it out and put it in some food grade type buckets. And I've got some information below about those buckets, and I also did a short about what type of buckets I use. Now again, go to the video description below and you'll check out the 8 commonly and most asked questions about packaging, and that's where I share what type of buckets I use. Now the 3 things that are gonna impact your freeze-dried fruit from going bad or soft is sunlight, moisture, and oxygen. And so it should be dry, so you don't have to worry about the moisture unless you're in a high humidity area, and that's when you'd want to be careful about where you're storing the freeze-dried fruit. But let's just talk about the other 2 factors, sunlight and oxygen. So with sunlight, if you're using bags like I have with my freeze drying business, this has a window on it. So if it's gonna be exposed to any type of sunlight, that is gonna impact the color of the freeze-dried fruit over time, as well as it's gonna impact the freshness of it as well. I typically try to get these sold within about 3 to 4 months using these craft bags. And I've got a link in the video description where I get these bags off of Amazon, but if you're gonna use something else that has windows, just remember the sunlight is gonna impact that. Now the third factor is the oxygen side, and that's when you're gonna wanna use oxygen absorbers to put into the bag. Now, there's a lot of different debate and information about what type of size oxygen absorbers you should have, but generally you wanna go with probably a 300 cc oxygen absorber. And one video I love that talks about this is on the Live Life Simple YouTube. He's got a great video that I'm going to link in the video description that talks specifically about oxygen absorbers, and he goes through all the science as well as what type of sizes to use and all that type of thing. So I'm not going to go through that, but you would want to use an oxygen absorber for your freeze-dried fruit, no matter whether you have a Mylar bag that doesn't have a window or one that does, okay? Now, if you wanna know more about packaging and get these questions answered that you have lingering, go to the next video that I'm gonna share about the 8 commonly most asked questions about packaging your freeze-dried product. I'll see you there.